Thank you again for joining us for our semi-annual update and community meeting for the Community Air Protection Program. My name is Marshall Haprov. I am the Public Information Officer here at the Mojave Desert Air Quality Management District. I also have joining me today Alan DeSalvio, our Deputy Air Pollution Control Officer, and Jorge Camacho, our Support Services Supervisor. This is, like I said, a semi-annual meeting. We held one other meeting this year earlier in the year. We previously held these meetings annually, and now we're holding them twice a year. This is specifically for the Community Air Protection Program. So during this meeting, we will not be discussing nor taking questions or comments on anything else Air District related. This is specifically for projects, potential projects or suggested projects to be covered or processed through the Community Air Protection Program. I also want to point out that any project that we discuss, whether it's already occurred, it's ongoing, or it could occur in the future, is limited to occurring within our jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction, as you can see on the screen, covers the entire desert portion of San Bernardino County, bordered by Kern County to the north and west, Los Angeles County to the west and slightly south, to the inland empire portion of San Bernardino County, most of Riverside County, except for the Palo Verde Valley and the city of Blythe, which is within our jurisdiction, and bordered to the east by Nevada and Arizona. We will also be taking feedback from community residents throughout our jurisdiction. Again, any projects that we discuss or that are suggested have to be occurring within our jurisdiction. And with that, I will pass it along to Jorge Camacho, our Support Services Supervisor. Jorge.
Hi everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for sharing your time with us. As Marshall may have mentioned, this is our semi-annual Community Air Protection meeting. It's actually our 8th total meeting concerning Assembly Bill 617, also known as the Community Air Protection Program, which you'll see me refer to as CAP for shorthand, or AB617. Just know they're interchangeable. Prior to moving along, I do want to provide some background on the legislation itself. Authored by Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia and passed into law in 2017, AB 617 directed the California Air Resources Board to establish the Community Air Protection Program. The focus of the program was to reduce exposure in communities that were most impacted or most burdened by air pollution and cumulative exposure across the state. As part of this program, the California Air Resources Board also selected various communities throughout the state that will need to take further steps in support of AB 617. The next few slides will address the overall goals of 617 at the state level. Then we're going to focus particularly on the action the district has completed in supporting the goals of AB 617. Next slide. For the CAP program, or 617, the California Air Resources Board, which I can refer to as well as CARB, wanted to focus on community action, and they identified 6 areas that needed to be addressed. The areas were community level air quality monitoring, community emission reduction programs, accelerated retrofit of pollution control or industrial facilities, enhanced emission reporting requirements, increased penalty provisions for polluters, and lastly, grants to local community groups. Next slide. Once CARB identified the 6 main areas for community action identified in the previous slide, program elements were created to address these areas. The program element had to deal with monitoring, emissions, funding, and emission reduction program. Within each program element, there were objectives to be achieved at the state and in some cases the local level. For example, within the monitoring element, there were directives to establish a community air monitoring network. You'll learn more about our purple air sensor networks later in the presentation. Within the funding element, the state provided incentive funds for eligible organizations to purchase new and cleaner engine technology. And lastly, for the emission reduction program element, the district worked on a BARC implementation schedule for applicable facilities. BARC stands for Best Available Retrofit Control Technology, and you will learn more about that later in the presentation. CARB further developed additional elements such as a technology clearinghouse, In this element, the state and local agencies will look at additional emission control technology for stationary, area-wide, and mobile sources, emissions reporting. Annual reporting was created for specific facilities and development of a uniform methodology for reporting. And lastly, a resource center to provide organizations with best practices information, as well as education information on emissions and outreach tools to help support the program. Now, in order to get into, we do have something where the CAP guidelines provided guidance for the air districts on how to implement the program. The initial guidelines were published in 2018 and were revised in April 2024. The revision included a variety of new project categories and updates to existing project types. For example, the district can now potentially fund community greening and vegetative barrier projects. Prior, the projects were limited to selected communities only with community emission reduction plan. As the CAP program is ever evolving, CARB and the air districts are working on additional updates to the guidelines for this year. Now, in addition to the CAP funding guidelines, were also updated. The purpose of the funding guidelines were to provide guidance for administrating agencies so we can design and implement the program in a way that meets statutory requirements and advance the state climate goals of Assembly Bill 617 or the Community Air Protection Program. The purpose of the funding guidelines was to provide guidance for administrating agencies, which I already mentioned. Some of them were facilitating GHG emission reduction, maximizing benefits to disadvantaged communities, and targeting investments to priority population to help ensure investments. Then lastly, in October 2023, the Community Air Protection Program Blueprint was updated. The blueprint is CARB's statewide strategy and implementation guidance to reduce harmful emission and exposure to air pollution in communities most impacted by poor air quality. The blueprint reflects the experience and lessons learned in the beginning of the Community Air Protection Program. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Community Air Protection Program is still growing and evolving, and the California Air Resources Board is continuously seeking input from stakeholders on how they can improve the program or other areas to consider. This slide has a link to CARB's CAP page, email contact, and the ability to subscribe for updates on the program. If you haven't done so, I would encourage everyone in today's meeting to visit the website and sign up for the newsletter. Now, next, I would like to introduce Mr. Alan DeSalvio, our Deputy Air Pollution Control Officer, who will tell us more about the action the district has taken in support of the program.
Thank you, Jorge. AB617 applied to the Air District to 4 specific facilities in 2 source categories. The Mojave Desert AQMD was required to adopt best available retrofit control technology requirements in the form of a rule for a facility in the Strills Valley area in the northwest corner of San Bernardino County. The Mojave Desert AQMD has met that requirement through the adoption of Rule 1157.1, which was adopted in 2019. That rule has now put in place the most advanced retrofit control technology requirements in the state of California on sources of that type. In addition, the AB617 requirements apply to all 3 of our Portland cement manufacturing facilities, which have Portland cement kilns. And the Mojave Desert AQMD has met that requirement through a revision to Rule 1161 in 2018, which has resulted in our cement kilns now having as well the most advanced retrofit control technology requirements in the state of California. The federal ozone non-attainment area is a term we often use for many of our reasonably available control technology rules. And you'll often hear me use the term FONA. Rule 1157.1, for example, applies only outside the FONA. The FONA is the Federal Ozone Non-Attainment Area, and it refers to the area that the federal government has designated non-attainment for ozone. However, the Air District, the Mojave Desert AQMD, is concerned about the entirety of the Air District. So we adopt rules that apply to the FONA and also outside the FONA. And the state requirement for BART obviously is a state requirement and not a federal requirement, and it applies throughout the district. The other requirement that applies from a stationary standpoint or monitoring standpoint is the community sensor requirement. And the Mojave Desert AQMD is complying with this requirement through the installation of purple air sensors. As you may know, the Mojave Desert AQMD operates 5 stationary federal reference method facilities in very large population centers. However, the district covers 20,000 square miles and has population spread in a variety of distant locations, obviously including Needles and Mountain Pass. And so the Air District has funded with $617 the purchase and installation of purple air sensors. These are all indicating locations of district-owned or funded purple air sensors. Some of these the district has installed at their locations, at our locations, or our monitoring sites. The rest have been installed on a voluntary basis. And it looks as though there are large swaths of the district that are not covered by purple air sensors. That's because there's no one that lives there, and there's no infrastructure for us to support the installation of a community sensor. However, it's the district's position that these community sensors are complying with the community monitoring element of AB 617. Thanks. Is this one me, Marshall? In addition, the state of California has recently engaged in a very advanced, comprehensive improvement to the criterion toxics inventory program. And in response to this, the Mojave Desert AQMD is now spending a significant amount of time inventorying and reporting sources all the way down to individual engines, in some cases, individual spray booths, and other sources that we would not have reported prior to this significant upgrade. The information that we gather, we submit to the Air Resources Board, and the public can access that information through their pollution mapping tool, which is a method to get to it as shown in this slide.
Hey, Alan. Thanks for that information, and thank you for clarifying the action that the district has taken in support of the Community Air Protection Program. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Community Air Protection Program, it does have a focus on community participation, but most importantly, gathering community feedback. The district has had several meetings with stakeholders over the past year. Initially, and in previous meetings, the community supported funding zero-emission equipment when feasible, with an emphasis on clean transportation for children. As the program has gone on, the community has also encouraged us to fund other traditional diesel-for-diesel replacement projects, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, we do encourage the community participation, and we advertise the meeting via press releases, social media posting, and promoting the meeting at chamber events when we're able to. Now, in addition to the outreach, we also have a Community Air Protection Program webpage. On this webpage, you can find information about past meetings and recording, a list of completed projects and projects that are in progress, and other documents showing the action the district has taken in support of the program. And also, more importantly, I do also want to point out that on the webpage, residents and stakeholders can complete a survey to provide feedback at any time during the year. This webpage also has our contact information if anybody have any questions, comments, or feedback. So even if you do miss a meeting, don't worry, you can always provide feedback, and we're always willing to accept it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, not only did we have to take action to the district, the state also provided the district with Community Air Protection Program incentive funds or grant funds to kind of implement some of these programs and to help areas that were impacted by air pollution. Now, the Community Air Protection Program incentives or grant funds are part of California's climate investment, which is a statewide program that puts billions of cap and trade dollars to work reducing GHG emissions, which strain the economy and improve public health and the environment, particularly in disadvantaged and low-income communities. Now, the grant funds or incentive funds provide financial incentives to both public and private sector entities to reduce emissions by retiring and replacing older equipment with newer engine technology, for example, and prioritizing zero-emission technology and infrastructure when possible. Now, there is strict criteria for the incentive funding. Some examples of projects that we can fund were school bus replacement project, replacing diesel school buses with zero emission, mobile equipment replacement, which I'll talk a little bit more later because that was a new project category, zero emission infrastructure, which includes EV charging and hydrogen fueling stations, which are applicable, as well as community greening and vegetative barriers. The district is also open to consider additional project categories, allowing to have direct air quality benefits to disadvantaged and low-income communities. Okay. Now, to give you a background on some of the projects we have funding, building on feedback from the community, the district partnered with Northwest Pipe Company located in Adelanto, California. The district provided grant funding to Northwest Pipe Company to purchase 2 near Tier 4 forklifts, which is shown in this picture. This was a unique process that the grantor retired and destroyed several pieces of equipment. Now, it was replaced with the Tier 4, which at this time was the cleanest available engine on the market that was not zero emission. Continuing to build on community feedback, as I mentioned earlier, we did get encouraged to supply or to fund zero emission school buses for children or clean transportation products. So something that we're proud of, that the district has partnered with 3 local school districts: Lucerne Valley Unified School District, the Apple Valley Unified School District, and the Adelanto Elementary School District right now, to replace 10 diesel buses with 10 zero emission options. Now, we are still working and encouraging additional school districts to participate in this program. And also based on this feedback, the district also applied for additional federal funding known as the Targeted Airshed Grant, where we also applied and were fortunate to receive additional grants to continue to supply zero emission school buses for the district. Now, with school buses, there's an infrastructure need. You need to be able to charge these school buses. Now, not only did we fund these school buses at, I believe, at 100%, we also provided funding for the school districts to install charging stations to be able to charge these buses. In this slide, there's actual pictures of the charging stations that were installed at the 3 different school districts. Now, as I mentioned, one of the newest changes that occurred last year is the community also provided feedback to kind of replace traditional diesel-to-diesel equipment or other projects that weren't necessarily zero emission, allowing that a direct air quality impact in disadvantaged and low-income communities. Here are 2 examples of agricultural replacement projects that we funded using community air protection funds on the market. As you can see, you have a before and after pictures of some of these tractors. And this was literally based on community feedback that we received. Now, one of the main criteria for funding equipment replacement project is that the project must result in reductions that are quantifiable, enforceable, and permanent, specifically dealing with emissions. How do we ensure this? In most cases, the baseline equipment is destroyed and rendered inoperable. As you can see from these pictures, these are some of the equipment that had been destroyed as salvage yards to kind of ensure that we get those permanent emission reduction. If you go to our webpage, as mentioned earlier, we actually have a video of a school bus being destroyed. And it's also kind of pictured in this, one of the pictures here. Sorry, I should have not used picture twice in there. But you can see a real life video of that project being destroyed. Next one. Now, currently, we have additional current school buses, zero emission school bus replacements with the Snowline Unified School District and one more with the Lucerne Valley Unified School District. As I mentioned earlier, the district is also providing funding for the infrastructure needed to charge those buses. Now, as far as total projects that we have funded using community air protection funds, we have done 13 zero emission school buses, 3 electric vehicle infrastructure projects, 2 industrial forklifts, and 4 agricultural pieces of equipment based on feedback from last year, for a total awarded funding of over $6 million. Now, just to be clear, there are strict criteria for incentive funding that I mentioned earlier. So even if projects are proposed, we have to make sure that eligibility criteria is met. For proposed future projects, and this is where we want to gather feedback as well, the district would like to continue our work with school districts for zero emission school bus replacement projects, work with the school district for potentially zero emission lawn and garden equipment, and air filtration systems for classrooms. And when not available or when these projects aren't here, we would like to continue to replace old diesel equipment with cleaner engine technology. For example, like the agricultural equipment replacement project we showed earlier. If there's no objection from our residents within our boundaries, we can continue to do this, such as replacing equipment. Or is there any other feedback or comments on these proposed actions or anything else that anybody would like to mention that would have us, consider as well? It's an open floor, and I think, Marshall, you can unmute anybody, and you can also insert your feedback in the chat as well.
Yeah, anyone participating right now has the ability to unmute if they'd like to share any feedback or ask any questions. Of course, can use the chat as well, as Jorge mentioned.
I'm not seeing any hands or feedback. Just want to make sure.
Jorge, we do have a question in the chat here.
And I'll read out the question. One of the questions we have, do you know about what type of funding you will be getting for a farmer project? This is specifically dealing with community air protection funds. However, if the feedback received from the community and stakeholders is to also look at using community air protection funds for agricultural equipment, that's something that the district has done, and we can continue to do if that's the feedback that we get from stakeholders. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Jorge. This is Nisha. And one more question since I'm talking now. How do school districts get involved in the electric zero emissions buses? Because I noticed our local school district, Palo Verde Unified School District, was not one of the school districts mentioned.
So normally when we submit we put out our normal solicitation period on the beginning of January to the end of February, and we advertise that we're also taking projects for our community air protection program for zero emission buses. So if you have a school district that is interested, you can share our contact information. They can also visit our community air protection program page so they can get more information, and we can definitely work on getting that school district involved and able to participate if they would like to.
Great, thank you.
So I'm not seeing any other questions. So just to kind of recap, as far as just general community feedback, we're going to continue to work with school districts for zero emission school bus replacement project and other zero emission equipment and infrastructure when applicable. If not, we can continue to work on diesel to diesel replacement, focusing on the ag industry, since that seems to be what feedback we received last time, and other traditional diesel to diesel equipment replacement projects. Now, as I mentioned, this is not your only, just to kind of recap, even if you can always provide additional feedback anytime during the year via our webpage. So even if you can't think of anything now, please contact us so we can take your comments and record your feedback. So just to end up doing that, just remind people, like I mentioned, about completing the survey online. Our next community air protection meeting is tentatively scheduled for February 2026. And if you haven't done so as well, I would recommend subscribing to our newsletter to get information. And there is a question from Ryan, and I'll read it out loud. Thank you for the question. Why can't Tier 3 or Tier 4 interim equipment be qualified? With the community air protection program, we actually have a little bit more leeway, so we can consider those equipment. Typically, if we're going from a Tier 3 or a Tier 4 interim to a Tier 4, which is the cleaning engine technology, normally the cost effectiveness limit is pretty low, so it doesn't qualify for a large grant amount. So typically other projects can express that, but we can also consider those projects to fund with the community air protection